sushi and a brother. Fuck everything that taints my dreams. I risk it all for a two-piece. Cause I won't see anybody rock it like me. Can dress it up or down, looking nice, girl, shine like a diamond. I see dollar sign, bling, bling, finesse, sing for free, yeah. I might want my waist, but you should see my crew. Ain't gonna walk all day, cause we not in the mood. Diamonds around my waist, but you should see my crew. My crew, yeah. Feeling brand new in a black dress, looking real nice, you might think I'm an actress. We pull up to the mansion, tryna bust it down, Playboy Bunny in the Hamptons. See Melly, my girl, she's so pretty, and Lexi, the one that can style up the city. Got no time to be waiting in line, no, we won't pay your price, VIP, all we did. Dress it up or down, looking nice, girl, shine like a diamond. I see dollar sign, bling, bling, finesse, sing for free, yeah. I might want my waist, but you should see my crew. Ain't gonna walk all day, cause we not in the mood. Diamonds around my waist, but you should see my crew. My crew, yeah. We can get fucked up too in the back of the Benz, manifesting what we want. We get lost sometimes, but we can pick it up. Cause we ain't got much to lose. Keep on moving till we find our way back home. And we gon' want to let go. I might want my waist, but you should see my crew. Ain't gonna walk all day, cause we not in the mood. Diamonds around my waist, but you should see my crew. My crew, yeah. She see my crew. She see my
Hello. Hello all. It's really cool to actually see people in 3D in this space. For those that don't know me, I'm Bree Stewart, the mental health consultant and clinician, and I've had the privilege of serving Victoria's music community for the last year and a half in terms of mental health and wellbeing. When I started the job, we were well in lockdown, so a lot of these sessions were actually completely virtual. So it's actually really awesome to see people here. So big props. Thank you for coming. This is the first event, I think, unless Simone wants to challenge me, I'm pretty sure this is the first event that has actually come off the back of one-to-one sessions with musicians, artist managers, and bands. And there was this kind of theme, this ongoing theme over the last year and a half of I'm not enough. I'm not enough as a musician. I'm not enough as a creative. And of course, a lot of that came out of creative comparison, sometimes comparison in business, how they're running their business. A lot of it was social media. And then noticing people were in this sort of stress response all the time. And if we're stressed, creativity is killed. So I'm really excited to hear from our guests today. I will oscillate between the notes a wee bit as we kick off, but first things first, before we bring her out, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we live and work. We respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I would like to acknowledge the hardships, horror and harm that they suffered following colonisation and the devastating impacts of that, which are still evident and felt today. The fact that the Wurundjeri people and culture have managed to survive and thrive demonstrates enormous strength, resilience and adaptability. On behalf of everyone present today, I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, as mentioned, we're here to talk about comparison in the music industry. In terms of the kind of psychology behind all of this, for a long time, social comparison's been very healthy for humans. It can inspire us, it can motivate us. So just acknowledging that there is some good in it. It's kind of what gets us going when we look at what other creatives are doing. But today we're going to be focusing on when it becomes chronic and it kind of turns into that creative envy. And I have a wonderful guest that I'm about to introduce to us, some kind of real-time lived experience of this. And what I'd love to do today, because we've got a few people, and I think we've got a few people on YouTube as well, is to really encourage you, if you have any questions, just to mull them over through the session. We're going to allow about 30 minutes at the end for some Q&A to either myself as a clinician or to Cassidy as an artist and performer. But I'll introduce this wonderful human who's tucked away back there. So I'd like to welcome to YouTube and Music Market our special guest today, Cassidy Crème. Cassidy has had international success in the Malay scene as a singer and performer, where she featured on every major TV and radio station in Malaysia. She's amassed over 9 million views on YouTube and a collective social media following of over 400,000, which will be very relevant to our discussion around self-esteem today. Cass, thank you. Please come on out, and a big round of applause for her. She makes her way. Plonk yourself here. Hey. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, nice to see some of you all here. Well, all of you in real life. Thanks for coming down.
So, just to kick off,
yeah,
I want to know, you've been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is what keeps you in this industry? What keeps you performing, singing, making music?
Okay, I guess you could say I came out of the womb singing. So I've always been a natural born performer. And for me, personally, I went straight out of high school into professional performing. So for me, it's sort of always just been a really fun way to make money and do what I love. And we always used to say it was like getting paid to play. As I've gotten older, I guess the challenges that come along with the industry have come to the forefront, but I still just love music, and I love being around people who love music and performing and creative energy. I feel like when you can find people that are genuine in that love as well, it's what keeps all of us coming back no matter what capacity we're involved in the industry in.
So for you, it's sort of like a complete non-negotiable There's no...
Yeah, it's not a choice. I'm constantly asking myself, why do I do this? And then, but you still find yourself finding more ways to involve yourself. So it's just I don't know if a calling's a word, but a passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that, why do I do this? This comes up a lot in one-to-one sessions with musicians specifically, more so than the artist managers actually. What is it? Do you notice what's happening when the why do I do this comes back into play for you?
I guess that's because it's a career that constantly pushes you and constantly makes you question everything about who you are, and it has a lot of peaks and valleys constantly. And I've learnt in my time that when I'm at my lowest of lows, it means I'm just about to shoot back up to a high. But my family have definitely been very instrumental in supporting me through those lows, reminding me why I do what I do. So it sort of always comes full circle, I think. But it is the name of the game that it will continue to be a circle or a roller coaster. It will never just be easy sailing.
It's like radical acceptance in the roller coaster.
Exactly. Surrender to the ride.
It's interesting hearing you talk about, the family support, because it's an industry that seems to guarantee burnout in a way. I mean, you're doing late hours. It's pretty much on and off contract work, and it's one of the few jobs you're kind of handed a beer at the start of your shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a lot of managing emotional and I guess your emotional workload. And if you're performing in the way that I perform like I leave nothing on the stage, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I put so much of myself into every project or performance that it is extremely draining. But you keep coming back. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Malaysia? Like, how did you end up in that circuit?
Okay, so I guess I was always a performer first and not technically what I would have called myself as a musician. I had really bad performance anxiety, like severe performance anxiety, and had a few bad singing performances where I was like, I will never sing again. My mum, who's here, can attest to me crying in the car saying I never would. So I leaned more into being a dancer and was performing at theme parks like Movie World and SeaWorld. That then ended up taking me as Marilyn Monroe over to Universal Studios in Singapore. And then a dare between friends got me to make a YouTube video in a language I don't speak, or didn't speak at the time, which went mega viral, and that started my recording career. So it kind of was like something I fell into, but it sort of, I wouldn't say it was like an immediate uphill climb from there. It was like a very big, slow, rocky roller coaster. Yeah.
And you were signed to a label over there, and was that right?
I was signed to a major over there. I was under Warner Music Malaysia. It was my third record contract that I got offered that I ended up actually signing. So I was in a dual contract between them and an independent label that was under them.
What's it been like coming back to Victoria specifically? Because I'd imagine the culture's, it's a bit of a jump in terms of the expectations too in the industry.
Yeah, it's an extreme jump, I would say. For me personally, at the time, I was no longer with my record label. When the pandemic hit, I'd sort of had parted ways with my record label and gone down into the depths of depression. And just before the pandemic hit, was like up to the peak, and I was doing things like performing at the YouTube Awards and the Palace for the King and all those sorts of things, the Opera House, and I was like, I'm back, baby. Like, I finally worked my way through all this. And then Mum called me and was like, you need to get on a plane, there's a pandemic. I was like, no, you can't make me come home. And so being ripped from being like at the top of your field to, we were in country Victoria in lockdown, was a major shock to the system, but one that I'm deeply grateful for. Deeply grateful.
Yeah, it was sage advice, by the way, Mum, wasn't it? Jump on a plane. Yeah. Okay, so I guess thinking a bit about, the impacts of self-esteem. I mean, you've mentioned there's a lot even on the impacts of self-esteem, a major adjustment that wasn't really your choice, sort of something quite external happening. When you think about your experience of comparison, where do you find that you're comparing yourself to others typically in this industry?
Yeah. Well, I guess being a performer in all aspects, I think there's so many different ways. There's healthy comparison where we compare ourselves to like how far we've come. The hardest one for me was that complete crash landing of being pulled out of this career that I'd spent, I think it was 10 years learning the language and building, and then coming home and starting from scratch. But also then realising for me was such a journey then to realise, oh, cool, so I achieved fame, and I was obviously very lucky to be anonymous in Melbourne. I feel like I've gotten a fresh slate, but in Malaysia it was like any Uber, the driver knows you. There was no privacy. All the things that we always wish for, I got. And for me, the biggest comparison struggle was comparing what I thought fame and success would be to what it actually was, and feeling a lot of guilt for how absolutely not fulfilling it was. So I'm constantly been working my way back around to take what I can from those amazing experiences I had, but also deciding to rebuild a career for myself now that doesn't repeat any of those mistakes that what I thought it would be set as expectations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there was a grief around what it wasn't, essentially.
Absolutely.
What it didn't resolve for you internally.
Couldn't put it better myself. Major grieving process that had to be done.
What were the kind of things you had anticipated it would give you that it absolutely didn't in terms of your emotional well-being?
Yeah, well, I mean, going to Malaysia itself, it was sort of setting myself up for failure. It's not only achieving fame, but you have no support network. You have no sort of friends there. You have no family, no partner, nothing. So you're really alone, which exacerbates all the problems. But for me, the pinnacle of realizing this is not going to fulfill me was this situation I had. My record label had released my first single and really like had put everything behind me to try and boost this release. They organised this holiday with Cassidy, which 3 fans got to bring a friend. They also had 2 label reps with me and 2 media reps. And we all went away on this island destination holiday, and it was, though like a super cool experience, it was the most depressing experience of my life because everyone there was brought as a pair. And so I was the only one that was alone. I was roomed alone, and I had a language barrier, and when I tried to speak my limited Malay, some of the fans would sort of like make fun of how bad I was at speaking it. And just the nature of fame, I guess, is we want to be noticeable, but then you don't realise that you stop being a human being. And so the only time anyone talked to me for this 3-night holiday was to put a camera in my face and we all pretend we're having such a really fun time and it's so great, haha. And then as soon as they were done filming their story, they just ignored my existence. And so I felt really alone, and then we did all the day's activities, and then as soon as everyone was like, couldn't wait till dinner was over and they could go back to their rooms, and you could hear everyone in the rest of the thing partying and having a great time, and I was sitting there like it sounds really trivial, but I was sitting there looking out at the ocean that was literally at the doorstep of my thing, but I was the loneliest I'd ever been in the world. And there was this gorgeous little ginger cat that was a stray that came and sat with me every night, and I just cried the whole time because I was just like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. You've achieved this success, but no one sees you as a person anymore. So yeah, even the fans, it's no one's fault. It was just my expectation of, oh, this notoriety will bring satisfaction, and it really didn't. Yeah.
I've been guilty of doing, my partner's, like she's seen me try and nick a pint to talk to an artist I was a huge fan of. But, and then, I was too pinty to talk to her. But even in that process, you're losing the presence of the moment with the artist of just saying, hey, I love your work. It becomes a commodity. And it sounded like that's how you felt, that you were really just this kind of momentary token of, look who I'm with on social media, and done. I'm not actually going to have an engaged conversation with this person.
Yeah, exactly. Taylor Swift did like a really good parody, if you look it up, where she was standing out the front of her house waiting to get a ride, and these girls like pull up in their car and they're screaming the whole time. They run out, they take photos with her, screaming the whole time, get in their car and drive off. And she was like, hello, how are you're welcome. Like, they didn't even say a word. They were just so enamored, which is just the nature of the fan. Everyone acts a certain way when they're excited, and a lot of people don't want to be intrusive too, but I think if we don't set ourselves up in a way that we've got our own support network around us. Now I have beautiful friends that I work with and things like that, where it's like, oh, I can enjoy the back end and the front end of my job, whereas back there I had to learn the hard way that we just go, no, it's out there. What I need is out there. We always think that the record label will provide what I need or whatever, and it really is the opposite once you get it. You're like, oh, I had everything I needed.
Yeah. Amazing. So comparing, the comparison trap for you was more compared to what I thought it would be, and then that kind of ambivalent grief around what it wasn't. Are there any other areas that you're finding today that you still struggle with artistic comparison?
Absolutely, always. Always feeling like we're never doing enough, right? There's so much, social media has added a whole other level of just pressure of what we need to be giving and putting out, and and it's like there's no one way to feel like you're on top of all areas, and there's so much pressure to do so. But also I feel like I'm reestablishing myself here, and I'm in the process of creating my new releases that I'll be entering into the music industry here, but I've had to be really conscious myself of not rushing those out to feel validated in being present here. But I also feel like I'm a working musician as well. I'm doing singing, DJing, I'm doing covers, I'm doing everything, integrating into the industry, whilst also major comparison of every gig everyone else is doing. So I feel like we never feel like what we're doing's enough. No matter what gig we get, we're always looking at the Instagrams of the other people who are getting probably better gigs. And a big lesson I've had to learn for myself is to reevaluate where I want to end up and who I'm comparing myself to, in the sense that, well, maybe the gigs that you're comparing yourself to that they're getting, that you're like, I really wish I was getting those gigs, I don't feel good enough that I'm not getting those, that might be the biggest gigs they ever do, and that might be their goal. They've worked for the last 10 years to get those gigs. But then when I sat back and pull myself out of my ego and go, what's your goal? Those jobs aren't my goal, so they might not be meant for me. My goal's way over here, something different, and that's not my path. So I've had so much that I've had to check myself. And what is social media pressure on like what I should be doing and like what the cool kids are doing, or you know what I mean? Like, that's the cool places to work or whatever, as opposed to what's my true path and journey going to be for the rest of my career. And if I get focused on that, I'm going to lose sight of it. So constantly checking myself.
It's good. I feel like it's always easier to opt out of being one of the cool kids.
Yeah,
It seems way too hard.
Go all in on being my awkward self.
Yeah,
that's what
carry
I say.
on.
Yeah,
carry
exactly.
On. Just throwing in a clinician tip too. I'm sure I've made you do this at some point, but something that can be really powerful, especially when you're a young artist, but at any stage, whether you're an AM or a musician or an event manager or whatever, is just that simple values work too, because our values evolve and change all the time. And it is so easy to get pulled away, isn't it, by, what our manager thinks we should do, what the label thinks we should do, but actually just those kind of basic life buckets, like what do I value in a relationship? What do I value in family? What do I value in work? I reckon every 3 months I'm doing that now, because life will pull you in a direction unless you're quite solid on who you are, what your needs are, and what you care about, which it sounds like when you say self-check and kind of checking in with yourself, that's the journey for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've done work on this. Full transparency, I see Brie, I've used the service, and that has been instrumental. I personally had like complex PTSD. I got diagnosed with when I got back from Malaysia from my journey there. I had anxiety, depression. I was newly diagnosed ADHD. There was a whole lot that I was bringing to the table when I started seeing Brie. And sometimes it was the challenge to just sit in the stillness that you would push me to do, that I'd be like, oh my God, it's so helpful to just look within and be still for a moment, because I feel like we're always our workload's so overwhelming.
It's reactive by nature.
It's so reactive, and that is so important, just to reevaluate constantly.
You mentioned phones a wee bit there with the Taylor Swift story and people taking snaps. So what's it been like for you dealing with because Instagram and TikTok and the like seems to be the big endemic at the moment,
Yes.
beyond the music industry, especially
Yeah.
for young people.
Yeah.
What's been your journey with that, and then how do you kind of resolve the pull of social media?
Yeah, well, I guess I went through major burnout in the pandemic because when I moved home, I was like, I've got to be creative, got to be creating. And I started putting out full recorded covers with like multi-character green screen music videos every week. And I did it for 3 months and burnt myself out so deeply, and also realized the cultural change of social media here. In Asia, when you go to any kind of gathering or like hang with artists, I'd be like, cool, we're going out with all the artists. And it was literally like 6 of us at the table. Everyone was on their phone. Everyone's like, we're having the greatest time. And they're straight on their phones, you know? So it was a full extreme to here. I would notice if I brought out my phone, I sort of felt like everyone's like, what are you doing? Why are you filming us right now? Like, we're just having lunch. Why are you taking photos of your food? So it's a very big shift in that sense. But I personally then pulled away from social media. I had nothing to post. So my social media following has, you know, dropped maybe just under 10% since I haven't been posting in about a year and a half. I just post a little bit of like shows I'm interested in, but I've really taken the pressure off myself to be like, okay, there's so much noise of what we have to constantly be making. I'm just going to pull back and just figure out what actually feels right. What do I want to put up there? What fulfills me? Not, I'm just going to go and do this because it's what my followers expect of me. So I've really pulled back, but I've seen a lot of things. Recently I was doing a show and it was deeply concerning to me because there was a young child who I think she would have been about 12, sat next to me on the stage, and she goes, "You're the lucky one." And I went, "Excuse me?" And she goes, "I have a huge following on TikTok, so it's you that's lucky to get a photo with me right now." And I was just like, what have we created? Oh my God. You know, but I get that. Like your ego gets inflated.
Is that such a, she's 12 and she's already
She's
there?
12 and I was like, you sassy minx. But, you know, it's just, unfortunately, that's what we're creating. So it's very concerning. But I think we're also navigating it. I've mentioned previously, there's so many people who built massive online followings and then went, I don't like this anymore. I don't like the stress of this. And they've started closing their channels or pivoting their directions. So I think we're still all finding our way together, but just realizing we need to give ourselves a break. We're not a full company. Like even companies struggle to keep their social media happening. So we can't be so hard on ourselves that we can't get high engagement.
And I mean, we were talking just before the event that it's always a projected self. Even mine, you know, it's people are like, yours are so authentic. It's like, no, there's so much shit you're not seeing on there, and it's it's still curated to an extent.
Absolutely,
it's very hard not to just put your projected self on social media, which is important because we all have one. Like, you're not just going to sit here and be vulnerable 24/7 when getting your work done. But it's a very interesting space because also you can leverage it and it can enhance your career. I mean, you mentioned that your career was kicked off by YouTube.
Yeah, it was weird. I was like doing cover gigs in the city on the side of working at Universal, and it was like we put the video out and then the next night there was like a taxi driver that stopped in the middle of the road and was like, "Cassidy, I love your song." And I was like, "Wait, what, huh?" And it was like nominated for a music award for a cover. And I was like, "What is happening?" So I have social media to be very grateful for in that aspect, but we came up at a very different time.
Well, we're MSN babies.
Yeah.
We're hotmail.com kids.
Yeah, we are. Exactly.
AFK.
Yes. Oh, ASL, is it?
Yeah, ASL, yeah. I was doing away from keyboard because I was never there.
Yeah.
What do you, I mean, it's interesting for you because you have a huge following, right? You've got especially, I mean, your YouTube's got a big following as well. How do you kind of disconnect from that? Because you're talking about sort of pulling away from it consciously.
Yeah.
How do you actually sort of talk yourself into stepping away? Because I'd imagine, in a way, this is quite a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah,
to
it is.
the X amount of followers on Instagram and whatever.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you?
Well, I think it also comes into my neurodiversity a little bit, in the sense that I've had to find peace with the fact that planning is not my strength, and it never will be. I've never had a content schedule that I've ever stuck to. Even if it's like, I'm going to do this today, it's probably going to happen at 4 a.m. the next morning. And so for me personally, my life has always just been sharing what's happening in my life, and then by working really hard, manifesting cool stuff and sharing that with my followers as transparently as I can, while still trying to maintain a sense of my own self away from it, which has been a big challenge. But for me, it's literally just been giving myself the grace not to post. That's all I've had to do. And it's really hard for me because I do pride myself on authenticity. So realizing that I only post to share what's going on in my life, I don't really create content for online, I've felt a lot of lack of self-value and a bit of imposter syndrome when it comes to, oh, well, technically shouldn't I be going out and finding every Malay restaurant in Melbourne and, making content for these beautiful people that have followed my journey? But at the same time, that would only further fuel burnout if that's not actually authentically what I'm doing with my day.
There's a kind of dilemma I see with artists, with managers, where the manager kind of rightly so is getting a bit of heat from the label to get the artist on TikTok and on Instagram and working every day in that space.
Yeah.
What would you say, because you've had a manager and you've had a label, what advice would I suppose you give to an artist manager who's trying to kind of balance those two? Because they really are facilitators in between the two, and it can be a lot of pressure on both ends for them. What could they do for artists that might help with navigating?
I would say stop following the templates. There's so much content in the authenticity and in the candid. Everyone's constantly, the label's no, we need them saying this, we need them creating this content, but that's not what connects with the audience, because they're cool, this artist has now popped up out of this pot plant holding this thing saying cool this. No one buys it anymore. So my advice would be literally get to know your artist. The biggest struggle I had push-pull with my major label was that not only were those staff so overworked, it was one social media person overlooking the I think we were the national team of artists that was 15, 20 artists trying to get us. There was nothing they could do for us, But if you spend one afternoon getting to know your artist and filming a bunch of ridiculous stuff, some candid stuff, all that sort of stuff, that's going to connect with the audience so much more than what you think will. So I think it's all about getting back to the humanity of behind the scenes.
It was the original point of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the original point, and then it became endorsements or okay, we're releasing a song, we have to say XYZ to promote it. And you'll see the ones getting the ultra viral stuff now, that everything is the relatable and the authentic. That's what everyone's hungry for. Celeste Barber. Everything that you've been told you should never do is what people are now building their empires off of.
Yeah, it's tricky. So the artist manager kind of pushing back and going, remember why we signed this person, and what their fans are after is them. Is their energy. So let's get into the grittiness of this as well. Body image.
Oh, yes.
This is,
gotta love it.
Huge issue that I've seen anecdotally. No evidence-based or data around this, but I'm sure Support Act would have something on stress, anxiety, and body image. How's that journey been for you? You've been in the sector a long time, across a couple of countries now. What's it been like for you?
It's been a damn roller coaster. I grew up as a dancer, and long before body image was at all even a thing, it was the norm to be criticized about your body. Basically, it all came to a head for me when I was doing a full-time course right before I moved to Malaysia, dance course, and my dance teacher, I'd always been called the big girl. Oh, you're so pretty for a big girl, or you'll never be a dancer unless you lose weight, so you just don't have the body type. And then same when I got into singing, it was yeah, but my body was always an issue. So I had a lot of deep-seated trauma, and I did struggle with binge eating and self-esteem. And then it came to a head when my dance teacher had a bit of a run-in with me in front of the whole class and said, "You're just lazy." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I've been working my butt off this whole time." And he said, "No, you're not lazy as a dancer. You're just, you look like a lazy person." And I was like, "Are you calling me fat?" And he's like, "How can I say this? You're never going to be successful unless you stop eating. Look, I can train you as much as I want, but there's only so much glitter I can put on a piece of shit." And I burst into tears. But that stuck with me forever. And so it was like everything I ever did, I was like, I'm worthless because I'm not thin. And it played on me so hard. And so many other performers, I know it's the same way, because there was only one style of being acceptable in the industry. Music, dance, cabaret, performing arts, whatever it was always that one ideal of like the showgirl. So that really weighed on my mind. And then in the pandemic, when I was taking a lot of time to heal, I was like, hang on a minute. Like even my record label too, at my signing meeting, they were like, "All right, I can see it. You're going to be big on the walls. People are going to have their posters of you looking much thinner than you do now, obviously, but they're going to love you." And I was just like, shut down. Yeah, it was full on. But I realized in the pandemic, I was like, I've achieved everything that I've achieved with never having that body. And it gave me so much peace. I had to get real with myself and be like, I am someone who fluctuates multiple clothing sizes depending on my emotional state. And no matter what size I was, I still was able to create these opportunities. So that's given me a lot more grace. And also I have to say, moving to Melbourne and the amazing things that are going on in the performing space here and the diversity of artists that I'm seeing is giving me more confidence. And there's like, some stunning people who just are not anything like what we've been told you can be successful at now, getting success and recognition. And that, I think, in space empowers the rest of us to be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I can embrace this. I don't know. Do you, with, I guess, your work, musician-wise, I would say, do you feel that this comes up quite a lot?
Yeah, and it's regardless of gender. Can be he, she, they, them. It's right across the board, and it's tricky too because even outside of the industry, it's a transgenerational issue. We're kind of one of the first generations to start to really shift the language and change the definition of what health and well-being is as well. We know that health. Being healthy isn't being skinny, that doesn't necessarily equal health and well-being. So having a really solid understanding of your concept of well-being as well, like is that mental health, physical health, your social health, the whole gamut. But I think, certainly when I grew up in the 90s, it was just about looking away. That was unattainable to many of us.
Totally.
But just that acceptance, a beautiful book on this is Your Body Is Not an Apology. I don't know if anyone's read it, but it's just a gorgeous book. And Jamila Jamil, I think.
Oh, amazing.
I don't know if anyone listens to her, but
amazing.
Just, again, adjusting the language, looking at the systemic issues behind body image. But for musicians, absolutely. Anyone in entertainment, I think, is under so much scrutiny in that space.
Totally. Yeah, and it's exactly right. It's across gender, and even what Sam Smith's been going through lately and things like that. It's just like horrific that that's still happening. But I think that's one of the positives of social media is that the artist now get to say and the audience gets to say. So if you see what's going on with an artist that's being judged for their body, you have the choice. Do I go and support that artist or do I support the narrative? And you can see that people are biting back and being like, hell no, you wear what you want to wear. I think you look fantastic. So there's so many positives and negatives to social media, but I think the body positivity movement is really only just beginning, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Do you have a strategy with the kind of microaggressions there's so many, but, body image, being a female artist, what do you do on a day-to-day? Because we have these conversations which are lovely in theory, but
Yeah.
a lot of artists will say to me, you're not with me at 11 p.m. at night dealing with people that are a wee bit coked up or are being
Yeah.
a bit aggressive in a very passive way.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that when you're about to go on stage and maybe you're dealing with comments about your body or misogyny or whatever's happening on the night?
Absolutely. I would say pre-pandemic, I would just cry. I was always known to be an immediate crier. So much of it has to do with the ability to separate yourself from it, which is a hell of a lot easier than actually doing it, right? Everyone's like, don't worry about it. And you're like, no, that just like cut me to my core.
Like I'm a human.
I am human and I am very sensitive. So for me, it's always leaning into friendships and not being afraid to say something about it, because your friends who are surrounding you will sort of help you diffuse that, I think, whereas we always feel like we have to just like keep it in. And if you kind of acknowledge how you're feeling in the moment, dissipates it a lot faster than being like, just get on with the show. I'm just like, oh my God, now I'm not afraid to be like, can you believe that person just said that? Malaysia, for me, it's culturally very different. In Asia, one of the top 3 conversation starters is generally like, have you gained weight? Or, you know, for me being an online person, people would see you in person and be like, wow, you're really fat, huh? And I'd be like, just start crying all the time. So for me, there was no way to navigate it. So when I come to Australia, it's a very different cultural context. So I feel like I don't have to navigate it as much. Yeah.
It's an amazing job, you know, because it's a job where you get to be energized by engaging with an audience and engaging with your art. But it's a really sticky one. It's sort of the one parallel, I think, with counselling. If I'm in between a session and someone says something that's a bit of a pass-ag jab, it can actually really derail what I'm about to do. So it's a sticky space, and it's kind of, when I'm talking to people, how do you find that window to kind of do your deep breathing and go, yep, that did affect me, and then where's the outlet? But it is so important as well at a collective level that we're setting boundaries with people when they make comments about a woman's body or anyone's body, and sexism and things like that, but it can get fatiguing as well, understandably.
I guess I have a question for you then. It's something I have tried to master, because I'm one of those people that gets really mad at myself because I don't have the sass and the wit to come back in the moment. Some people are like, you know, someone will say something inappropriate and they're like, well, that was inappropriate, or, oh, that's how you talk to people. You know what I mean? And bite back, which I really admire, but I'm not that person, unfortunately. I'll 3 minutes later been like, the coolest thing to say would have been this, but the moment's gone. And so then I get like quite mad at myself for that. So my question would be, do you have any ways, I guess, that people like myself who are not good at being on it in the moment, should we be like preparing ourselves mentally before we go into these situations? Can we then buy ourselves some time, or is it we just need to be a little bit more understanding and empathetic of ourselves, that we don't have to have something witty to come up with? Does that make sense? You know what I mean? In the moment, what is sort of a good way to stay in your own power, I would say, when you've got someone taking a stab at you? Is it sometimes best not to engage?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's all that coming back to that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and what our natural coping mechanism is. But I think heaps of people need time to process what someone's just done to them. I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm not one of those people. I'm very reactive. But I know those people, and this common frustration of I've missed the moment. A lot of the work I do with groups or bands is based on this kind of imago therapy. And it's really about communicating feeling. So you don't have to agree on the content of what's happened. It's like what you said hurt me, it impacted me, and I'm just expressing that. But I don't know who invented this imaginary rule around once you've missed a moment, you can't set a boundary. I think it's people need to remember you can always go back to someone, and leading with those I statements, you know, hey, when this happened at the gig the other night, I really actually felt a bit uncomfortable. So I'd appreciate it didn't happen again. It's hard with boundaries because if you don't set them, you're not even going to have the opportunity to see if that person's worth sticking around. If it's worth working with this manager or working with this booker, you need to set a boundary to see how many times you need to kind of remind the person of that boundary. But of course, I don't know who invented that. I feel like it was like maybe a thing where people have a fear of, if I miss it, they're going to say, why didn't you tell me? And it's as simple as going, well, I needed time to process because we're all different. But that's getting very much into kind of labeling feeling and then communicating, and it's really scary. And sometimes it's not safe. You know, it's not always safe to challenge someone. So it's tricky, but self-acceptance first. The goal that we're trying to do at Music Vic with counselling is moving from the self-acceptance into the self-empowerment. So that's when it gets a lot easier, I think. Thanks for interviewing me back.
No, that's all right.
Appreciate it.
I'm selfishly using this time to get answers out of you. Strategize, please.
No, that's good. So I guess something I'm curious about is what do you feel the Victorian music industry can do better around supporting artists with this challenge of ongoing compare and contrast to other people in the industry? Is there anything that, you know, labels could be doing better or managers could be doing to help their artists with this?
It's really hard because I think it stems so deeply in so many different avenues. I'm doing my master's in arts management at the moment at RMIT, and so I'm really delving into the management side as well as the artistic side. And I recently did a lot of research into what helped me as an artist, and the biggest thing was mindset training. We're giving so much practical advice, and it sounds quite abstract, but we're giving a lot of advice on here's the ABC you can follow. But for me, the biggest thing that had the most monumental success for me in my career and created a resilience that I haven't seen in a lot of other artists was what I exposed my mind to. And for me personally, like one of the biggest game changers was these they're called motivational mixtapes by, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Dr. Eric Thomas. He's E.T., the hip-hop preacher. He was like a YouTube person I found online, and he has these free motivational mixtapes that he released that I used to just play on repeat, and it just drilled into me this mindset that prepared me for everything I think I went through, although it all came crashing down eventually. I feel like I'm seeing so much practical advice, but we could be doing a lot more in the mindset space.
What are your thoughts on the kind of ageism in this industry? You know, because it's sort of, I am surprised it's still a big conversation piece. I had a 24-year-old musician tell me the other day she was past her expiry. And I was sort of like, I didn't realize that artists expired. You know?
No, totally. And that's the way it is. Like once you can't get played on Triple J anymore, right? People think, oh, it's over for me. I think that narrative's completely changing as we're seeing 70-year-old musicians still touring the world. People are going, oh, cool, I can still do this. And we're seeing artists making it at whatever age. That's still going to take a little while to break down. I still believe it myself. Sometimes I'm 35 and I'm like, have I missed the boat? But then I still have so much more to give. And it's sort of like, no, I think now I finally know myself well enough to have something to say as an artist, whereas previously I was a bit more of a puppet that just liked performing.
Right.
So it's coming full circle. I think the industry itself here is doing a fantastic job, especially I did the Women in Music mentoring program, and that was people of all ages, and that these programs that are being offered are being made available to people of any age. So I think that's slowly being dismantled. But it'll be interesting to see, because I think, you know, you're seeing Shakira, J-Lo, everyone's in their prime now. Yeah. You know, they may have multi-million-dollar whatever supporting them to be there, but
it's handy, eh?
Yeah, it's handy. It does come in handy, but you know, I think I mean, compared to what I got to see in Malaysia or not, they definitely, there's so much that we offer here that I just wish they could experience over there. There's so much support and so many places you can go and meet fellow musicians, and so many programs on offer to get answers and strategies. So I think we are so far ahead of the game of what I've experienced elsewhere in Victoria.
Good.
Yeah.
It's a very small window to be in your 20s. You know, it's sad to think that we're losing all these amazing creatives simply
Yeah.
because they've left that decade.
Absolutely.
But also, you know, when Adele said the tikka who, you know, she's
No.
like
Oh,
not
yeah,
onto,
yeah, yeah.
because she wants to make music for people getting
Yeah.
divorced and buying a Winnebago or whatever. And
Exactly.
it's like every generation has something to offer. You know, it's sad to think that we're losing this talent because
Yes.
they're like, I'm done.
Oh, totally,
over.
totally. And I love that they were like saying that to her. And she was like, I'm making music for 30-something-year-old women, which is great. I feel like people like Lizzo as well are making music that speaks to people that haven't been spoken to, and it's showing that gap. So, and as other artists continue to age, I think they're not afraid to do that now. So I think the record labels are learning just as much as the artists are that, oh, we need to change if we want to stay in this game as well.
For sure. So as we draw in, just thinking again about resolving this anxiety, which it sounds like, you know, you had a big journey with your own anxiety and depression.
Oh, yeah.
And just kind of, I suppose, this notion of the ultimate kind of staying in your own voice, staying in your own artistry. Where are you at with that now? Do you feel like you're confidently within your own artistry and it's your creative voice in this moment?
Yes. With what I have in the pipeline, for the first time ever, I feel like I said, I've got something to say and that I'm saying it, and that I'm not afraid to, because I guess for me as well, my music will have a bit of that mindset training integrated into it, which sounds really ambiguous, but it'll make sense when I release it. But for me, the biggest disconnect for me has always felt like I feel like our career can feel really narcissistic. And so I always felt like I was like, oh, but I'm not trying to make this about me, but I know that I really love connecting with people through performance. How do I do this? Whereas now I feel like with the music, I'm writing myself. I'm allowed to write music. I'm collaborating with other people who make music. I love that my body my whole body responds to,
It's
as
like
opposed
a healthy ego.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like I'm creating stuff that I now feel will help other people, and it takes away that element of narcissism, whereas a lot of creatives are very sensitive, and I think some people get lost in that fact of being like, I just don't want to talk about me and how great I am every day. So now I feel like I'm coming into my own where I'm like, great, I have something to say that's so much bigger than what I am. So I feel good. I feel like I'm in a good place. I'm excited for stuff that's to come soon.
Amazing. It's all kicking off.
Yeah.
It's not even tangible mental health advice, but I do writing outside of counselling, and I had this whole fear around originality, you know, and like what is my voice, and does it matter? Everything's been done 7,000 times. And I see this pattern too with musicians of like, well, you know, this has been done, like this exact thing I'm doing, but it hasn't.
Yeah.
Because only you have your voice. And this was something one of my sort of writing mentors said. He said, yeah, your story and the plot and everything, and probably there's a character that's almost identical, but it's never been told through your voice. And that song's never been written by you. Those lyrics haven't been written by you. So it's really, in a way, I know it's a very natural human response to compare, but it's quite a pointless task in a way.
Absolutely.
You know, because we're here for your voice and what your worldview as a musician.
Yeah, and I think that's also, I guess, speaks to age in the industry and why people who are a bit older have a lot more to offer, because if we're just cutting people off at mid-20s, some of your biggest heartbreaks or some of your biggest challenges and all those sorts of things, you haven't felt them yet.
There's some juicy
Yeah,
stuff
exactly.
coming.
You can't write about them yet. You haven't been crying on the balcony drinking straight out of the wine bottle at 4 a.m. because you're heartbroken, you know, like, and they're things that I think now we're going to enjoy the fruit of, but the imposter syndrome is real because it feels like originality's out of reach. But I think then when I create now, I focus on who am I writing this for, and I think of one person that needs to hear it, and that's where you have to laser your focus instead of being like, what's going to be a big hit on the radio? What's like this whole demographic of people going to write? It's like, no. Now I'm going, what did I need? And that's where I'm writing my songs at the moment is, okay, what did me 2 years ago need to hear? And that's what we'll write this one song about. It doesn't have to be a hit. And if you do it that way, I feel like more people resonate with the outcome.
Beautiful. Who's the person besides me that needs to hear this?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed as well is I find the creatives that are a bit kind of embrace the multifaceted nature of who they are as well. So just generating something else outside of music, whether it's photography or cooking or gardening. I don't know what it is, but through COVID, a lot of the creatives I was working with that found something else that kind of informed their music. So even though they were carving out 10 hours a week to some other hobby, it was really interesting. And I don't know if it kind of just strips back the pressure of the whole artistic identity, which is there. It's always going to be there. Like if you're an artist, you're an artist. You know, you're creative, you're creative. But it was just something I noticed. It was really interesting. I don't know if that has ever happened with you. Just digging your teeth into something else. You're like, I haven't tried it yet.
No, I think I'm so obsessed with all facets of entertainment in the sense that I like the creative side of like the music video. I want to do the props, the costuming, the everything. I see everything as like a full vision.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's often hard to then hone into making, but wait, you've got to create this song to go with that vision. For me, it's giving myself time off, definitely.
Yep.
Releases that burnout. So I think that's the same
Step
thing
away.
as well. Yeah.
The other thing is coming back to values work is just figuring out what you value the process of doing. I feel like it's different for everyone. Some people love the stage, some people hate it, some people love recording, some people are apathetic about it, others love writing on their own. I think that can be quite powerful too, just in life, you know, even not in the industry, is if I actually don't enjoy the process of this, it's going to make it a lot harder and you'll be in that stress response all the time. I'm going to stop the psycho waffle because I'm really keen for some, and that was psycho babble, sorry, not making fun of people in psychosis. I'm going to stop fluffing. I want a big round of applause for the amazing Cassidy Crème over here.
Thank you.
So awesome.
Thanks, right back at
Sharing
you.
so much from the heart. I love it.
Could we also get a clap for Brie? Amazing, holding space and asking such good questions.
Thanks, doll. Thank you. I'd love some Q&A because I think that's the best bit, and I've allowed a chunky amount of time for it too. Holly, did we have anything from YouTube?
Yeah, we do. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Yes. So the first question I have is from Joanna, and they've asked, when you are self-managed, how do you do everything you're expected to do without burning out, especially when you have a mental illness or disability?
I don't. Or I get stuck in burnout, literally. For me, that has been, I guess, one of the biggest frustrations. I was only diagnosed with ADHD just before the pandemic hit, so that was another fun thing to throw on there and try and come to terms with. But the reason I got diagnosed was I was crying to a friend of mine who is a counsellor and saying, I just cannot wrap my head around these certain aspects of the administrative side. Why am I not good at these? I'm such a high achiever. She was like, I think you need to go and get tested for ADHD. And I did, and as soon as I was even taking the test, I burst into tears. I was like, my whole life makes sense. And I guess then the biggest challenge has been releasing the expectations of what I should be good at in managing my career and not being afraid to ask other people for their help to make up for those, but also realizing that a neurotypical aspect of the market is to tell creatives, okay, you need to have this career plan, you need to, like, our goal is we're going to do this many sales, we're going to have this many releases, in 3 months we're doing this, 6 months we're doing that. And some people approach business that way. I'm the opposite. However, I've realized that, okay, I just set outrageous goals for myself. Like Mum can attest to saying to her in a taxi, we were driving past the Opera House in Malaysia, and I was like, I'm going to perform there one day. And she was like, yeah, sure you are. Cool. You know, she didn't say that, but she was like, smile and nod, sure you are. And not even a year later, she was flying to Malaysia to see me perform at the Opera House. And I had no plan on how to get there. As an artist, as a self-managed artist, there was no plan. My work ethic, which is where the mindset stuff comes in, was that I had enough belief in myself to believe that I was capable of doing that. And so I said to myself, like, it's not even a question, like, I'm going to perform there someday. And then I just worked my absolute ass off on everything I did, and that's my work ethic. That means that when that opportunity suddenly popped up in a Facebook DM one day from someone I worked with 3 years earlier, they were like, hey, could you come and perform at the Opera House for 5 nights at the end of the year? And I was like, well, yes, I can.
No.
I was ready for it. You know what I mean? So I've had to give myself grace to realize there's not one way to skin. What do they say? There's not just one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
That's
It's very
horrific.
Aussie
I'm a
of you.
cat lover. I've got
Yeah.
2. Yeah, but I think we can have goals as goalposts of the direction and the level we want to achieve, but we have to give ourselves grace to also like go 800 different directions
It's
to
so
get
cool
there.
to acknowledge, well, there's something neurotypical happening too. I'm going to have strengths and I can leverage with that, and then there's going to be areas that are challenging. Do you find it easier out of interest self-managing than having an artist manager at the moment?
I would say it's a 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm constantly in
downs.
turmoil about it. I do find that I've spoken to some artist managers and they've said your dreams are too big and that's not my specialty. So I feel like for me, an artist manager, self-manager role is the best for now.
Yep.
But what I'm lacking the most would be the networking side. I'd like to have a bit more time to focus on the creative. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks,
Yeah.
Joanna.
Another question from Tessa is, do you have a self-care routine you turn to help deal with the lows in the industry?
My cats. No, my friends, my fur babies, and the gym. As much as I hate the idea of exercise, I really do. It's like the biggest battle in the world to get myself to the gym, but once I'm there, I love it. And if I don't go, my mental health declines massively. So leaning into great friendships and getting active really makes a difference for me. And also just letting myself have bad days if I have them. Curl up in bed with Netflix and the cats and we're good.
Yeah. Part of self-care is the acceptance that this day is a write-off, sometimes as well, especially in music. Because you do have such big highs too in your work that there's going to be a natural crash, I'm sure.
I saw a really fantastic Instagram reel. See, there's positives to this stuff. That literally was like this guy saying that his therapist had just taught him he was having a really low. And like I said earlier, we're such like high-low in our industry that the therapist said to him, yeah, but there's a reason why our heartbeat, when they see it on the monitor, is peaks and valleys, because if it's all just straight, you've flatlined. And I was like, whoa.
Wisdom.
Yeah, it was like, oh, truth bomb.
Yeah.
But that's literally the truth. It's always like, Mum will always remind me if I'm crying, being like, this has happened. She'll be like, yeah, so you know that you're going to get a phone call tomorrow that's going to change your life, right? And I was like, probably. And it always happens because you just got to let yourself ride that valley, I guess.
Good ones from YouTube. Anything else before I move to the audience? Or?
There was one other. Yes. So it's more of a comment, but there's also a question element to it. So in production/design, there is a powerful adage/pressure that you're only as good as your last gig, whereas by contrast, mistakes plus experimentation is so important. Can anyone relate? And that was to the forum. That was provided by Deb, but I will ask it of the two of you as well.
Do you want to go first?
No, that's all you, girl. That's out of the counselling room, that one.
I guess for me, there has been a whole lot of bad performances, and I take those so deeply sensitively, and I do always feel like that. However, I feel like as long as you get back up and do another one, then you're not held to whatever that last one was. And if anyone's going to judge you on imperfection, that already is your signpost of who you shouldn't be around. But God, I can tell you, I've literally fallen face first down 8 stairs mid-song, singing Rolling
There's
in the
video
Deep.
footage of that.
Yeah, there is.
At Cassidy, Crème, there's
Yeah.
video footage of it on her
I've
Instagram.
used that. That was on my dating profile for a while. Yeah, you just got to laugh at yourself, you know?
Yeah.
But it is. It's like, I mean, my father's a stuntman, so falling down's not like a big issue for me. I have no shame. But yeah, I think it's literally like, just get back up That's what I'm doing today, literally here.
Yeah, beauty. Thanks for that, YouTube humans. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, YouTube.
Anyone in the audience? We got the roaming. It's coming for you, Kitty.
Hello. Thank you so much
Hi.
for today.
Thank
This has been
you.
amazing. I have a question. A discussion that a lot of my peers and I have been having is about kind of artist image versus yourself, right? And I feel like there's a point in your career where, particularly with social media, and it's that kind of curated highlights reel of who your artist is, I guess. I'd love to just ask about your experience of like comparing yourself with that self, and whether it's, because the discussion that we've been having is whether in this day and age we want to try and be as authentic as possible to close that gap, or whether it is worth having a distinction between that so that there's a part of you that's protected. And I'd just love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And your image is amazing, by the way. You look stunning. I feel like for every artist, it's going to be different because some people, their on-stage persona is a complete character that's not them. For me, I would say it's an amplified version of myself that has less insecurity, but I still have the same like values and thoughts, and it's very amplified, but there's a huge difference. Like I was saying to Bree, like I've got my weave on today, and when I have like my pin-up look and like my wigs and my berets and everything, there's just like I hold myself differently, and I do, coming from doing like Marilyn Monroe for years and stuff, there is like a different, I guess, gear I shift into. And if I wear like my normal straight bob that you see on Instagram, I find I'm really transparent and authentic there. But when it comes to performing, I need a persona to be able to just switch gears. So, but when I was in Malaysia, I was living in persona 24/7, so I didn't know who I was without it. So it's a really hard space to navigate because you can get stuck into buying into your own hype or buying into your own persona that you forget who you are away from it. So I think monitoring it closely and seeing what works for you, whilst also maintaining, we all feel like we have to shout from the mountaintops, I think. Bree, you can disagree, but I feel like there's also pressure now with social media to be like, I have this condition, this condition, this condition. I, belong to all these different communities, and there's so much transparency that it feels like you can't have anything sacred. And to remind artists that you can, you don't have to give, you're not like owing them everything. So it's a part of, okay, what elements of my persona I think can I genuinely and authentically connect with people through without feeling like you owe them everything.
It's like beautiful self-protection.
Exactly.
Just that little bit of
consciousness, right?
Yeah. Because you do need a sacred space in your life, and just that time with yourself. But we kind of, it's amazing people being vulnerable on social media, isn't it? It's really powerful, but sometimes too, it's hard in a digital space as well because you're kind of putting it out there, you're dropping, and then you're leaving it. So being selective.
Exactly. Like I've obviously mentioned 8 million conditions that I have today, and there's more on the list, but I don't like put them on my social media in the sense that it's not in my bio. It's not like this is who or what I am. I'm happy to talk about things, but I think I do maintain now a little bit of grace. That's like you're allowed to have a version of yourself that only your friends see, as we talked about earlier with people's like that fame paradox where they want to get a photo with you. They're not also going to sit down and talk about your trauma with you unless they are relating to you and being like, I have the same trauma, and you can connect on that. So it's like, I think constantly taking note of like what feels good. And if you're putting yourself in situations being like, I really don't like having to talk to people about XYZ, then be like, cool, that's not part of what I share anymore. And I think I'm learning to, at any stage, it's okay to stop doing things that you would have shared maybe before, or
That's an awesome question, by the way.
It was such a good question.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really useful. That was really helpful. So thank you.
Good. Yeah, it's true to yourself, I think. You can be your amplified, unapologetic self as much as you want, as long as that feels good.
A lot of the work we've done with the community over the last year and a half, mainly with the musicians, has been working on archetypes. Like, what's your performance persona? Who are you when it's just you and the guitar in the bedroom? And then who are you when you're networking or you're at the pub? Because they're all parts of you, right? And it's just how do we integrate them? And then how do we know when to, like, I'm going to leave that one at home and bring this one out with me? Does anyone else have... Over here? Thank you. Oh, we've got a few. Go you, then you.
I mean, I can think of millions of questions, but one thing that I think of when I kind of read the subtitle is festival season is upon us, and so you put a lot of effort into applying for a lot of festivals. I had a release year last year, and I felt like I had a good chance to get into quite a few of those, and I didn't. So how do you prepare yourself for, I guess, because even though it's not meant personally, it kind of feels personally when you keep on getting a no. So how do you kind of set yourself up for that constant?
Oh, that's a good depersonalizing the no's.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can figure it out, let me know. Yeah, I'm completely unapologetically, supremely rejection sensitive. And so I do find that it stops me putting myself out there, and I wish I had an answer that was like, here is the answer. I find that for me, maybe creating buffers and trying to find people that can pursue trying to get those gigs for me, so it's not a direct rejection, has helped me in the sense, because it's the no's are never going to get easier, but sometimes distancing yourself from them, and it's not having to have a manager or someone, but utilizing your networks to be like, who has connections at this, blah, 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 could you represent me in this space so I don't have to, has been helping me, because I'm the exact same way. And then I'll be like, cool, rejection, and now I'll never apply for that festival again, when it could be something so not to do with you in any way, shape or form, but they're also not going to tell you directly why or why not. But if you had someone else representing you, they'll feel more comfortable, because you're now the product, you're not the person, telling you why that product didn't get the position and what was missing, whereas they're not going to tell you, the artist, because they know it's going to hurt you, I think.
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's often like what's underneath the rejection too, because there's something under there that we all feel, whether it's, just I'm not good enough, or I'm actually really sad, or I'm grieving. So there's usually something under a rejection. It means different things to different people. But even just talking to a good counsellor about how to equip yourself in that space can be helpful, because rejection's so unique to each person. It's a universal phenomena. Like, we all feel rejection across the course of our lives. But there's usually something beneath it that you can kind of feel, whether it's in your gut or in your heart. You sort of feel that pang of there's something I'm not doing enough of, or there's something that this rejection represents. But I find sometimes once you know what that is, you can actually soothe that a lot quicker, because it's almost a guarantee, isn't it, that there will be ongoing rejection in the industry.
Constantly. And actually now, as you're talking, I was like, sometimes I use it as fuel to be like, how can I level myself up right now and do something that I would never have done before to make them notice? So it can be a catalyst to growth as well. It just depends if we let that rejection hurt us and hold us back, or if we go, all right, cool, what am I not learning right now, or what else could I do? Because it's hard, because when you want to be an artist, you want to stay 100% pure to yourself, but sometimes when we push ourselves to find something just extra, like another gear we could kick into, another little level up, sometimes some of my biggest rejections have been the catalyst to that too. So it's not so much as feeling stuck like we don't have power, because we have power. We just can then go, all right, cool, well, all right, that doesn't vibe with you. I'm going to do this now, and you're not going to be able to ignore me. And it might not be just only focusing on those festivals and be like, I'm going to go and do this. And then eventually, like, I've questioned things I've done many times when it's come to rejection, and I've gone away and been like, I'm going to walk away from that and go really invest in this part of my career here, and then eventually they come knocking. So sometimes it's just being like, go back to the work, always go back to the practice and the work and the constant self-growth and then somehow it like magnetizes these people to you more than when you needed them. It's a strange
Do you decompress
paradox.
after rejections typically, or do you just go boom? I'm pivot. You pivot, don't you? Straight away.
Depends.
Yeah.
No, it really depends.
Yeah.
It depends. Sometimes it's ultimately shattering,
Yeah.
but I tend to just power through, let myself acknowledge it, but then I'm just constantly always busy creating something or
I feel like at every level it happens too in a weird way. I mean, even these artists that are on paper doing incredibly well, but then there's, you see them have audience rejections. They will get the spot at the festival. The audience is engaged, and it's kind of this ongoing. It's almost like at every turn it's going to be there somewhere, isn't it? So it's a great question. Was there another one back there? Oh, cool. Does anyone else have any juicy cues? Yep.
Hi. I guess, Brie, you were talking before about how comparison can also be good, like at the start. I guess my question is if you have any tips so when it starts becoming bad, like how to stop that spiral before it gets that bad?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. No, I think noticing when it's becoming bad and going straight to the why. I'd imagine if comparison's feeling healthy, so you go, like I'm a drummer, there's a sick drummer over there, I want to do what they can do. Something really beautiful is happening there, right? There's like a benchmark that's been set and you're quite present with their art. So then there's been a shift and it's actually gone from being present, being engaged and being inspired to I'm either angry or I'm envious or I'm bummed out or I'm in pain. So to be the why, like if there's been a shift in that moment for you, and this is where my clients get the shits with me because we spend a lot of time just going down to the why, but what actually happened? When did you notice the shift in the body? Has there ever been a time that you've sort of noticed that it's gone from inspirational to frustrating?
I don't know. I think it just happens fast. I can't think of like an exact situation right now, but sometimes it would happen and then like an hour later I've been thinking about this thing and I'm like, how did I get here? So
Yeah. I feel like I've heard this. I do this too a little bit, I think, and sometimes I even notice, especially with writing, there's writers I can't read even though I love their stuff because I'm like, why aren't I doing that? Why aren't I there? So there's something happening in that moment. There's an expectation or a belief I've got about myself, and it's just figuring out what that is. And I think the interesting thing Cassidy's kept coming back to is the resources she's got here in Australia. So, compared to when you're overseas, having the people you trust, having the very small circle that you can sit down and actually soundboard with and go, I don't know what, I just need a vent until I figure out what this is. There is a level of stoicism in music as well. I think we associate artists with people that are expressive and, are sweet to talk about their feelings. And that's true. I think, they're a dream cohort for a counsellor because they're very self-reflective. But there's still a level of stoicism and sometimes self-inquiry stops quite soon. Because that person out there that's suddenly bumming you out because you're comparing, they're just representing something. It's not actually about them. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
That helped? That was a good one. Yeah, cool. I'm assuming that everyone looks like they've been emotionally fulfilled at this late stage. So I might, unless we've got, one more. Beauty.
Hello. I was wondering how you might navigate or balance quality versus quantity, maintaining the quality of performance when you are feeling burnt out or when you've maybe accepted too much.
Good one. Well, it's hard too when you're using music to support yourself, and it's. I'm noticing at the moment I'm challenging myself a lot to go above and beyond in the gigs I do, in the sense of I'm noticing I can't say in the original industry in Melbourne because I haven't integrated myself that much into it, but in the covers scene especially, there's a lot of complacency, and so the way that I've managed to get higher paying gigs and having to do less of them in order, like, you know what I mean? Changing that power level where I get to do more of the gigs I want to do is over delivering and forcing the other entertainers to up their game, in the sense that, okay, well, you're doing one gig that they only want you to DJ. I do a lot of those, and a lot of people will come in and DJ, and that's their thing and whatever. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to DJ, but I'm going to pay attention to everyone in the room and what they're responding to. I'll only play what they react to. I will go above and beyond. I'll go out the front. I'll dance with people. I'll really just do more than what's expected. And strangely enough, just being so passionate about what I do has allowed me to then, when people come to me for more gigs, be like, well, okay, but my fee's this, or etc. And then I still completely overbook myself all the time. And there's, your passion jobs you want to do too. It's not necessarily about the money. So it's always a balancing act. But I would find that if you're finding the gigs you're doing are burning you out because you're doing too many, examining how can I level this up in a little way that I can demand a bit more because I'm doing a bit more than everyone else. Whatever your gimmick is, I've seen you perform. You're amazing. And so you do offer your own unique pizzazz and making sure you're aligning yourself with those venues. And in the meantime, whilst you're figuring out, like, literally what is my one thing that I do that no one else does, and being really strong standing in that in order to push for more money, I would say to figure out the venues that align with what excites you. Which ones are you super pumped to go and play at? And then try and weed out the other ones and lean more into those venues and finding venues like that. Because if it's fulfilling you and you enjoy being there, it's not burning you out. I've been
tapping into the feeling. Eh?
Yeah, it's all about the authenticity.
Do you feel like
if that helps, I don't know.
Do you feel like artists are withholding a lot of music now instead of releasing it more on the recording side of things? I've noticed that there's been a decline of gritty, nasty SoundCloud mixtapes, but where there's a lot of deliciousness, like when people used to just be uploading stuff that was recorded in their bedroom. Is that something you've noticed? This is just this kind of withholding thing I've seen, particularly with my cohort, but I don't know if that's across the industry. Or do you feel like you have to have everything polished before it goes out? Because it's that balance of perfectionism with comparison too. When you think about quality versus quantity.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm a complete perfectionist, and I need a catalyst to force me to put something out or get it out and get it done. But I think I'm seeing people starting to come back a little bit more to less of this pump it out.
Yeah.
And now it's coming back to when it feels right.
When it feels right.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing against the people that I know personally that are putting out original music, especially, or even DJ mixes and stuff. But it's still a bit of a grey area.
Cool. That's an awesome question as well.
So
I feel like that's a lovely question to wrap up on. And thank you to everyone on YouTube as well. I think there a few people had logged in. And so we really appreciate that as well. I just get another round of applause for this legend being so vulnerable and cool.
Thank you.
There's beer and chippy chips at the back. So grab a packet of chips if you like and live your best lives. In terms of support services, we have the Wellbeing Support Service here where we can provide you with information and referrals. There's Support Act. If you're dealing with trauma, Blue Knot Helpline are great. 13 Yarn if you'd like First Nations support. But feel free to email me, brie@musicvictoria.com.au for options and avenues as well.
And can I just say, can we get a round of applause for Brie and for Music Victoria? No, but seriously, Music Victoria I have leaned into deeply and come to so many of these events myself, and as well with it's been monumental for me having this service to lean into. So thanks for having me and letting me share my stuff. So thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Wanna repeat, dim the lights down low, don't believe me, I'm all in. Ooh, you got me hooked on you, tryna stay afloat, but you taking me under. See me from across the room, sitting in the booth, no, you want me on the no, your desire, I don't know, no. I drop it low, till we get high. all the plans that you had tonight. Get lost on the